since James Gunn announced there's going to be an Authority movie, I thought I'd make mention of, just by a strange coincidence, I had decided to take a look at this miniseries of Superman and the Authority. And of course, I stand by my position is that the Authority doesn't belong in the DC universe. It belongs in its own universe. I think it works much better that way. And for the most part, I think its best days are done. I think it's a story that's pretty much told. And it's just an idea is that they're a very dark and violent version of the Justice League. It was spun out of Stormwatch by Warren Ellis. And then you were introduced to these characters that formed the Authority. And primarily amongst its membership was Midnighter and Apollo, who were basically Superman and Batman knockoffs, and gay lovers. So that was the deal. And they actually had started out with just top to bottom Justice League team, but those members got wiped out in their first mission, and the only survivors was this Superman and Batman knockoff duo. But eventually you kind of get the same thing with the team. You kind of had a Hawk Girl. You kind of had this mystic guy who could have been anyone, Dr. Fate or whatever. He was called the Doctor. And then the only original one was, what's his name? The guy who was somehow connected to cities or whatever. Hawksmoor. Jenny Sparks was a character they had in there, and she was, special and stuff like that. So it deviated a little further from that, but you pretty much, that's what they were, still a dark version of Justice League. This kind of inspired the Ultimates that Mark Millar did for Marvel, and their take on the Avengers, this alternate version of them, and which was pretty good, actually, and probably would have made a better Avengers movie. But anyway, it had its day and its time, and it had an influence on it. And of course, it had Brian Hitch's art. And that's the image, interestingly enough, they used, or James Gunn used in his presentation. And I say, well, you're not describing that Authority. So he wants, because this is current era DC, which, forget about the decades of stuff that built that universe. So the Authority will be mingled in with these characters and will interact with Justice League members, I suppose. But a recent series, a little over 2 years ago, was this miniseries called Superman and the Authority, where Superman basically creates the Authority, recruits them through Manchester Black, this character who he was a member of a group called the Elite, which was a DC thing. But I guess I can't remember if he was originally a Wildstorm character or not at this point. But it's a mix of them. You got Midnighter and Apollo. Instead of the Engineer, you've got Steel's daughter, and she's amazing. She's perfect at everything. I don't know why you need the rest of the team. Just let her do it. That's one of those characters, A Flash / Green Lantern knockoff called Light Ray, not the Light Ray from the New Gods, just thrown in. And the Enchantress is tossed in here. A female, I guess, although they go out of the way to, they identifies as they, them. Yeah. And I thought it was Rampage, but apparently this is another version of OMAC in the series. And of course, Superman is forming that. The interesting thing is I just assumed this was an alternate timeline or another universe, what have you. Because Superman is much older. They actually show a scene in the past of him meeting with JFK. But this is, a setup for Action Comics when Superman goes to War World while his son, Jonathan Kent, takes over. I don't know if they'd already had decided that Jonathan Kent was gay by then, because that was kind of a slap job shoehorn thing for publicity, because the rest of the series was apparently Jonathan Kent coming out of the closet every issue. You can only do that once, but but that's all they had for that, but that's another story. And meanwhile, Superman, the real Superman, was on War World doing a Conan the Barbarian in space type thing. And the Authority was along for the ride. They were his sidekicks. And they were basically it was Superman and his amazing friends. Superman would not get along with the Authority at all. They were very violent. They were arrogant people. They were extreme leftists to the point of fascism, even though they would claim to be against fascism, but they were fascists. That's the conundrum there. But it was well crafted in its day. Unlike now, where everything leftist and woke is pure preaching, of cult-like thinking and whatnot. Whereas in the past, with these hyper leftist characters, they might have written them too well and too good, where you could see them for what they were. Even though a guy like Warren Ellis said, "No, this is how it should be." But anyway, but that's where it fit. That's where it worked off in its own place and everything. If you push characters too far afield to make them fit in something where they don't really belong, it doesn't work. The Authority would be villains in the DC universe. They would never get along with them. And the Superman's going, "Hey guys, let's try this out." And there's a lot of things about this that doesn't make any sense. Superman's really old. I don't know if they went forward with that at the time. I didn't bother. I'm not going to bother with the other issues because this was so bad. It's lazily done. It's a bit of a slap job work on Grant Morrison's part. It's decorated with his knowledge of Superman's past and all this stuff. And Ultra Humanite shows up, which is a cool thing. And especially since it shows that he could jump through a lot of different bodies instead of just the three that he's mostly been depicted in way back in the early. He was the first supervillain that Superman took on, not Lex Luthor. And he was an old man. Then he was in a woman's body. No, not that way. His brain was transplanted into a movie star woman, I guess because he wanted the money or whatever. And then he ended up in this giant gorilla's body. And that was it. They kept him in there. Seems like he would be looking for something else. Of course, he ultimately wanted Superman's body. No, not that way. I wanted to have his brain transplanted in it. But in the course of this story, he says, well, he's too old. His powers are fading. And so he's going to go get his son instead. And, who never appears in this series. And then, of course, he's teamed up with Brainiac. And so what? It tosses around things. It's a 4-issue series acting like it's going for some mission they really need to do. And it's just sort of slapped in. Oh, it's Brainiac and Ultra Humanite are up to no good. And the Authority have some idiot jokes. It doesn't matter. It was terrible. Sometimes the art was good, and sometimes it was just some fill-in last-minute slap job stuff. All for you to say, hey, check out Action Comics, where Superman and his amazing Authority friends take on War World. Yeah. So it's pretty bad, but this is the overall deal of that Superman would work with these people. No, he would not. And the idea, he would win them over. So then it's like, well, Midnighter and Apollo, maybe Apollo, they got this scene where he's got all this hero worship for Superman, and hey, I wanted to be you. Well, you were him. There's really no difference. And then Midnighter, he's a tough dude, but that's about it. He's not really the Midnighter that he was originally intended to be, and it's kind of like, well, what's the point? So the fear is for an Authority movie is that you're going to get this, watered down, lackluster approach of it, so that it'll fit in with Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. I just don't think that's going to work. I guess they'll bring them together to show, hey, they're a harder edged group, and they're not above killing their enemies, and quite far worse than that. We're hyper violent guys. But they'll come together for a common enemy and have an uneasy alliance or some crap like that. But the Justice League we need to take these guys down. They're terrible. So I don't think that would work. At least not honestly to the origins. If you have to, hey, we really got to change this up to where they're not knockoffs of the Justice League. Well, then they're entirely brand new characters then. So I don't know. But Superman and the Authority was pretty awful. So doesn't bode well for this concept.